I'd like to start with a question. What are the possible answers to the question, who wrote the Bible? Moses. Okay. God. People. Priests. Scholars. Others? Lay people. Excellent. Who? All of the above. Okay. Hired help.
Or scribes that are different from the priests.
Scribes that are different from the priests. Okay. Now I'm going to ask a second question, which is, does it matter?
Yes. No.
Typical Jewish answer. Yes. No. Okay. All right. Let's argue for a minute that it does matter. Why does it matter if we know who wrote the Bible?
Because if an individual or group of individuals wrote it, they would have their own interpretation of prejudices likely incorporated into the text.
Good. So there's a possibility of biases and own opinions that could be woven into the text. Good. What else? Why else might it be important to know? Say it again.
Is it
accurate? Good. Is it accurate? Right? What's the accuracy of it? Is it fact? Is it opinion? Yeah.
Well, it doesn't even have to be, but the time when it was written and what was going on in the
context. Right? It's important to know the context in which it was written. How does the context, the history, influence what's being written? Good. Yeah.
Particularly given what was written during the time of Babylonian exile, you're likely to have influence from, let's say, the legends and myths of the surrounding culture.
Great. So the text itself may be influenced by other stories that are being told from other civilizations around the area. Great.
Well, if it was written by God,
it has, to some people, would have a more compelling authority.
You use the big important A word, authority. There's another really big important A word, Adonai, but we'll get to that one in a little bit, okay? But authority is a really big thing. Why do we want to know the authority of the Bible?
The T.
Yeah.
Well, we follow the rules that are, prescribed in the Torah.
Great.
So we want to know how, who has the authority.
Great. We want to know who has the authority because we follow it. Okay.
Well, look where it is and look what we do. We parade it around.
Yeah,
It's
seriously. Why are we doing what we're doing? Like, are we just because it's? Who here has ever heard that before?
What did you say?
He says because it says so. By the way, this is one of my favorite questions that I ask people. Why do we keep kosher? Because it says so. What do we do to answer that question? We come up with all kinds of interesting roundabout answers to say, oh, well, it's good for your health, or we didn't want to mix with the people who weren't Jewish, or blah, blah, blah. But couldn't it just be because it says so? Yeah?
Also, if it's written by God, then it is not to be changed. So as we go through the centuries,
Beautiful.
It doesn't adapt to current.
That's great.
It started with God.
Depending on the authorship may dictate our ability to change or not change the text. I'll give you an example. The Constitution of the United States. You want to go even more specifically, the Bill of Rights. How easy is it to change the Bill of Rights? How do you change the Bill of Rights? More than Congress. You need a constitutional amendment. And how many votes do you need for a constitutional amendment?
3/4 of the states.
A lot. Right? It's not just a simple, well, I don't like it. That's right. And in particular, they made it really difficult. How many times has the Constitution been changed? Well, you could argue 17 times because the Bill of Rights was kind of there from the beginning. Right? They were still amendments, right? There were still amendments, and then there were another 17 on top of that.
But we don't know how it changed before we got the final form.
Oh, great.
Because there was oral tradition, we don't know where.
Was the Torah that we have now the exact same way it was when it was originally written? Or did it change?
Was it written in one time? It was written over...
Okay. Now, let's argue. Yeah, Michael?
I'm also not brought up. I want to make sure there's no fake news.
Oh. How much of this is real and how much of it is fake? How much of it is meant to be taken literally and how much of it is metaphorical or historical or allegorical or whatever oracle you want to talk about? Yeah.
Well, more than the authority, I think it's an issue of sacredness.
Ah. How does sanctity and sacredness play into the text? Does it matter, you could make the argument, if we know who wrote it? Because independent of who wrote it, we know what it's become. It's become a very sacred treasure. Okay, let's make the argument for a moment that we don't need to know, or that it's not important who authored the Torah or the Bible. Why is that okay?
Go by the content.
Just go by the content.
What it says.
The text itself speaks for itself.
But there are contradictions.
Ooh, there's contradictions.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
I'm sure. So there are contradictions.
For instance, thou shalt not commit murder, yet there are many instances where it says, give them death by stoning.
No.
No, but that's not murder.
No, but that depends on context, right? In the Bible it says you should give them death by stoning. In California it says you should... No, sorry.
Yes, lethal injection.
There are lots of stories in the Bible that are doubles.
That's
Good.
right.
Have you ever read the Torah, been sitting in shul in the Torah, maybe you were at home, and you read it and you were like, oh, that's really interesting, and then you read a little bit, wait a minute, didn't I just read that? Right? It's like you've just read the same story twice, but with a slightly different nuance. We're going to spend an inordinate amount of time on the creation story because it is an amazing example of the conflict that we're starting to uncover. Any other reasons why it doesn't matter who wrote it? But it does.
It was written over millennia.
Okay.
Things change.
Okay. Maybe it is an expression of change over time, and there's no way to attribute it to one person. Yeah, Sam?
It's our moral doctrine. It teaches us how to behave in a moral fashion.
Yeah.
And if that's what we're trying to do, trying to live your life, then this is our guide, our Jewish rule.
Yes. Great.
I've used this argument with evangelicals or fundamentalists, and I have to say that the Hebrew Bible is a document explaining, describing the relationship of man to God and man to man. It's not a biology text. It's not a geology text. It isn't really a history text.
Yes.
You take literally.
Yes, I had several Bible professors tell me, don't read the Torah as a history book. If you read the Torah as a history book, you're going to pretty much get history wrong. Okay, but yeah, it's an excellent point. Fatih?
It doesn't really matter who wrote it because most likely people who pick it up already believe in it.
Most likely the people who pick it up what?
Who pick it up and read it already believe in it.
Ah, so maybe it doesn't matter who wrote it because the people who are being given it already believe in it, or maybe it doesn't matter who wrote it because the people who pick it up will decide for themselves if they believe in it. Okay, we're going to try to explore all of these questions over the course of our time together. What I've given you is 3 different texts so far. I'm going to give you the syllabus next week. One is an overview of Jewish history, is a very broad timeline. The second text that I've given you, which is double-sided, has some of the major events of Jewish history. The reason that this is important is because one of the things we're going to start to explore is that the historical events of the kings over history and the priests dramatically influenced this text. All right? As well as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Moses, and Joshua, and all of these other people. But we have to do some really clear understanding of Jewish history in order to understand how this text was put together. The third thing that I gave you was a document. I'm going to be referring to this website a lot. It's called thetorah.com. It's also called Tabs, Torah and Biblical Scholarship. If you ever want to read or study the historical context or the archaeological context or the theological context of what's going on in the Torah on any given week when we're reading, go to Tabs, thetorah.com, and read. This article gives you an introduction to biblical scholarship. We're going to look at the Torah and pull it apart and twist it in all kinds of ways you've never imagined. Theologically, philosophically, archaeologically, historically, as a lay person who was sitting in the pews listening and being like, this doesn't resonate with me. What did you say, Stan? Politically. Yes, the Torah is a political document. It is perhaps the first political document, at least that was publicly and widely disseminated. All right? Yeah.
10 Commandments are all over every federal building.
Right, and right, so that's an interesting point. We've taken this and we've applied it in political ways. So we're going to look at all of those pieces. The other article that I was going to give you, I'll give it to you next time, is an index of the entire Old Testament and New Testament. I just want to leave you with one thing, which is terminology. We are going to call our study, we're going to focus on what I'm going to call the Hebrew Bible, not the Old Testament. If I say the Bible, I'm talking about the Hebrew Bible. I'm not talking about the Old Testament. I'm not talking about the New Testament. I'm not talking about the Apocrypha or the Pseudepigrapha. And if you don't know what those words mean, don't worry, we will learn about them. But if I'm talking about the Bible, I'm talking about the Hebrew Bible. I'm glad that you asked. We're going to start there next week because there are books that are included in the Hebrew Bible, in the Old Testament that are not in the Hebrew Bible.
Yes.
Okay.
Hebrew
The
Bible.
book of Esther is the book of Esther, the book of Song of Songs, Maccabees. Those are all great examples. I also want to, yes, the equivalent of the Hebrew Bible in Hebrew is the Tanakh. The Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. And if you look in this document here, where it says basic timeline, if you look on page 3, 4, and 5, I've given you a general description. Yeah, this one? I'll give you one. A general description of the Tanakh. The Tanakh is an acronym that stands for Torah, the 5 books of Moses, Nevi'im, the prophets, which are comprised of the major and the minor prophets. The major difference between the major and the minor is that major prophets have big books and minor prophets have little books, or shorter books. And then also the writings. And then if you look on page 5, I've given you all of the books in the Bible. When I say Bible, what do I mean? The Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh. Okay, we're going to look at this because it's important, because when we start looking at people like Philo or Josephus or the book of Maccabees, we're going to wonder, why are those books not in our canon? That's the last word I'll leave you with. What is a canon?
The sacred text, right? Canonization is simply finalizes.
That's right. When you canonize something, which one do you need? The one that I just passed? Were there?
Yeah, we don't have that one here. Do you have another one of those?
I don't. I made 30 copies. Apparently I didn't. I'll make some more for next week. Canonization is the act of taking a group of texts and binding them together into one work. The Hebrew Bible is a canon. The Old Testament is a canon. The New Testament is a canon. A saint who wants to be dedicated to some kind of higher thing after they die is... No, that's a different stuff. Okay. That's canonizing. But okay. So we're going to look at all of those different pieces. We're going to use 2 textbooks, and thanks to a generous donor, who I will ask if it's okay to publicize or not, thanks to a generous donor, we're going to buy these for you. Okay? These are 2 books authored by Richard Elliott Friedman. He's a professor at Berkeley. He's amazing, very thoughtful. He wrote 2 books called Who Wrote the Bible? So if you read the book, then I guess you don't have to come to class. If I start to see tape recorders everywhere, I'll know. Okay? So we're going to get this. And the second one is called The Bible Sources Revealed. And what's amazing about this text is that inside all of the Bible is actually color-coded with one theory of how the text was put together. So green and blue and light green and whatever, they all mean something. Our primary text for this class will be these 2 books and the Tanakh in Hebrew. We will do things in Hebrew. Don't worry, I will translate all of it for you. But I want to start to show you in a way you've never studied Torah before, the intricacies and the art and the beauty and the literature and the whatever of this sacred text. Right? The words matter. The letters matter. Rabbi Druin told me that the reason he became a sofer was because at age 8, when kids were doodling in their notebooks, he was writing Hebrew letters because he was fascinated by the letters and their shape and their design. And in Jewish tradition, the Hebrew creates a richness around what we study. And so we're going to look at all of that together. We are also going to look at parallel texts. The creation story in Genesis was not the only creation story.
Alternate text.
The flood of Noah that we just read was not the only flood narrative. Right? The book of Job, about when bad things happen to good people, was not the only story about theodicy, about bad things happening. We're going to look at other texts and other traditions, other ancient Near Eastern traditions, and understand how were they responding to the same questions that presumably our sacred text was trying to respond to. We all want to know how the world began. We all want to know what happens when God says to destroy the world, but we think God is good. We're also going to do something where we're going to look at chronology. One of my favorite teachings of the commentaries is Ein Mukdam ve'ein Me'uchar b'Torah. There is no such thing as early and late in the Torah. And so you'll read a text sometime and you'll think that it's chronologically out of order with the flow. And so we're going to look at some of those stories and try to understand what the right order is and how do we synthesize the order. Okay, any questions about the class? Sound interesting?
Yeah.
Okay, by the end, I hope that you will all have at least more insight into how to answer the question, but I would be skeptical if you walked away knowing the answer to the question. And if you do, by the way, please tell me so that I know before the end. Okay?